we built a startup about a famous man. You jump off a cliff and you assemble an airplane on the way down. Anyone knows who said that here? Okay. I expected I expected that I wouldn't get an answer here. This is by Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn as well, and now a venture partner at Greylock. So I'll tell you about the cliff that I had to jump off. Imagine that you are out of your master's. I completed my MBA from UCLA in 2014. And as all of you know, MBA is an expensive stuff. And so you are out of your savings. And then you're on a student visa, being an immigrant. You don't have a funding for the startup. And your co-founder says, hey, and you have some jobs. So I had like 2 jobs, one in Japan, one in US, that I was contemplating between joining. And in this situation, my co-founder says, hey, I'm leaving my job. Why don't you join me? And I ask him, do you have any funding? He says, no, I don't have a funding. I said, okay. So that's the kind of cliff you have to jump off. So you say no to the jobs. You have 90 days before you start a full-time job. You are on your OPT, which is those of you who are not aware, OPT is the time window under which you have to start. It's a one-year work visa that USCIS gives you before you can apply for an actual work permit, which is through H-1B or stuff like that. So that's the kind of cliff you jump off, and then you try to build the company on the way till you either bust or you actually build the airplane and you fly down. The good thing with this is if you jump off the cliff with some friends, it's much better. In my case, the friend that I had, we built a successful nonprofit together, and we've been in touch for more than 10 years. So I knew, and he was jumping off a bigger cliff than mine. So he was a product management director at Salesforce, and he was leaving his job as well. So that gave me some confidence, but still, it's a big cliff. So moving forward, some of the lessons, as I said, I'll be sharing some of the stories of like what I learned at the startup translates into what I'm doing right now. So this was the core hypothesis that we sold to the investors in the beginning. The hypothesis was most of the people are trying to be healthy, and they're using those weight loss apps or weight loss journal apps, which help you track your food habits, your exercise habits, things like that. The hypothesis was if you make it easy, because people were not engaging with those apps, the hypothesis was if you make it easy for you to track those activities or the meals, you'll start engaging in healthy behavior. So that was the hypothesis. Based on that hypothesis, we raised a little over $1 million, and we started working towards it. The one mistake that we did is we never spoke with the users. We had the hypothesis and we just kept building it. We had the money now. We built a team of smart people, engineers and community managers, and we just started building. 1.5 years into the process, we realized that, hey, it's just not working. Our hypothesis is not working. Then at that point, we started talking to the users. Someone told us, hey, how many users have you spoken with? None. Okay, so let's go and talk to users. That turns out tracking is not the problem. The actual behavior is the problem if you want to be healthy. So you need to eat healthy, you need to work out, and if you're not doing those things, no matter how many stuff you do here, it's just not going to work. So that was the lesson number one, is in the startup that you start developing. In my case, I started developing that user empathy, the need to speak with a user before you start working on a product. And that's one of the key things that you will do as a product manager. If you are a product manager already, you'll know that. If you are transitioning into a product manager, know it that this is one of the key things that you do is to speak with the users. You are the customer advocate in the room. So you'll have a team of people that will be, that will pitch different ideas to you. And the product manager, your job is to curate those ideas from the customer perspective. So you are the only customer advocate in the room. So I learned it the hard way, how to develop user empathy. Moving to the next lesson, how to get shit done and learn a lot very, very quickly. This is one of the articles that got published in Forbes of how we built a data science team without having an actual data scientist. So I know we have two data scientists in the room, and I really want to be careful how much of data science expertise I show here, because I can get caught really easily. However, as you know, our core hypothesis was we will make logging easier with the data science. So, and data scientists back then, at least in 2015, 2016, were in very short supply. I don't know what's the situation now. They are still in short supply. But we had to do that because we raised money. Our whole company was built around that hypothesis. So we started building some of those modules myself. So the way I started is like I went to YouTube. There is a Coursera course, very famous Coursera course by Andrew Young. I did that, and then I started playing with the programming and like tuning different models. And eventually, we built some of the best data science stuff in weight loss industry back then. So what we built was a meal recommendation engine, which meant you would be able to predict what meal a person has most likely eaten for the lunch, breakfast, or the dinner. We built a meal classifier, which classified whether the meal that you ate was healthy, neutral, or non-healthy, things like that. So we built a bunch of data science modules, which in the weight loss industry were not prevalent back then. The North Pole for weight loss apps back then was MyFitnessPal, and it had none of that models in the production. So that's when a friend of mine asked me to write this article, which got picked up by Forbes. The point here is you learn a lot, and data science is just one application of what I learned, particularly in my case. So you learn a bunch of other things. So for example, I learned how to drive app downloads. We had more than 500,000 downloads for our first app, Applause. So you learn how to drive app download, SEO. Then you learn community social media marketing. So even the current Facebook page that we had, it's still active. It has more than 7,000 likes. So things like that. So you start learning a lot of stuff which are very horizontal that you usually don't learn if you're working for a big company, because it's very siloed or it's vertical in nature. While at a startup, at least in my case, it was very horizontal. I learned recruiting, for example, how to interview people and how to sell ideas. So telling stories. You pitch to investors, you pitch to your team members, you pitch to new potential recruits, like all the time. So these are the things you have to learn, and you have to get things done. It's very impact focused, and you have to learn it really quickly because time is of essence. Money is running out in the bank. Investors are looking for updates every quarter. So it's kind of a crucible where you are learning right from the fire hose. Moving on. Let's see. Okay, sorry. Yeah. The other thing you'll need to learn that I learned in my case is how to make decisions in ambiguous situations. So I was telling the story of this hypothesis that failed. Now, fast forward to 2 years, I have realized that this idea is no longer working. We have some money in the bank, and we don't know what to do next. We can't keep doing this. And that's the kind of ambiguous situation, like your team is looking forward to working on the next feature or the next product ramp, whatever you had planned, and they will be executing against it. But now you are thinking of like taking a break and like steering the wheel to some other direction. You don't know what the direction will be. So that's exactly the kind of situation we were in. The options that we had were, return the money back to investors or keep working on this idea. Or the third option was figure out something new that might be useful to the audience. So you have to make the decisions in these kind of ambiguous situations. The good thing with us was we had some inclination, we had a hunch that if we want to actually drive the healthy behavior rather than just the engagement on the app, what we need to do is to make people more active on the physical front. So we came up with this hypothesis of testing out battle steps. Battle steps is a concept where you pitch two people in a day-long steps challenge. And whoever wins, whoever walks the most, moves on to the next round. So we started testing that with friends and families, and we got really good engagement. And then we kept working on it, and eventually this app became the most engaged app in health and fitness category on both App Store and Play Store. We started receiving a lot of positive feedback from the users, and that's how you learn to create delightful, life-changing products. So these are some of the screenshots from Battle Steps. This is one of my proudest achievements because if you are into metrics, the DAU by MAU ratio for Battle Steps was above 40%. For the our nearest competitor, Fitbit, that number was 23% back then. So yes, so you learn how to create in the whole process, although you learn from the fire hose, but you learn to create those delightful, life-changing products that your users really love, which is the core aspect of what a PM does. As a PM, you try to create products that have an impact, that are delightful to the users, and that are aligned with the company values. In our case, the company value was to make people healthier. That's our whole mission was. So long story short, the startup didn't work out for some other reasons. Moving on to LinkedIn. Now, we'll talk about how some of these lessons apply to my day-to-day job right now. So here is my first assignment. Go figure it out. When I joined LinkedIn, the team was ending, my specific team was ending its product lifecycle. So my first chapter was to go figure it out what the team wants to do next. Ambiguity. So I mentioned like how you learn to take decisions based on in ambiguous situations, and believe your hunch and develop that hunch. Actually, that hunch is actually comes out of expertise. So these are the things we learned. I learned actually. So for example, in my case, when we started for my team, we had like 5 projects that my team could take on as a long-term project. And eventually we started the same way I did at the startup, which is to like do some small prototypes. We did that, and eventually now we are working on LinkedIn events, which was one of the 5 projects that we were initially thinking about. The second one, get shit done, a fast one. I talked about how we built Battle Steps. What I didn't say back then was Battle Steps was built in over a weekend, just the friends and family version. The same applies here as well. So once we decided to go after events, we were looking for an event to launch the product, to the prototype. So we built that whole prototype to be launched at the next event in less than 3 weeks. For a company like LinkedIn, that was unheard of. That's no one ships a prototype in 3 weeks or even a month. So that was where my learning from startup comes in, is you start to ship things at a much faster rate because you come from a startup background, which is much more agile, and you have a weekly schedule. So even though we shipped in LinkedIn in a relatively very fast way, for me it was frustrating because I was used to shipping on a weekly schedule. So if you go back, I don't know if the App Store listing is still there for Applause or Battle Steps, but if you go back and see if it's still available, we have weekly builds that we have shipped out for all those apps. So that was our cadence, and if you bring that energy, that excitement, and that expertise of how to ship things at a fast pace, it's really becomes an advantage. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how do they motivate you to get that speed up? Because if there's something that's driving that speed, what is it?
The question is, because I've been told to repeat the question. The question is, how do I motivate people to work on that speed? Yes. So that piece comes later, which is the vision and the mission of the product that you are trying to excite the team towards. And the speed is not just a function of energy in the team, because big companies are relatively slow for a reason, and that reason is there are processes built around that. So for example, in a startup, if you are shipping product, you don't have to worry about legal ramifications. You don't have to worry about security and things like that. In a big company, those things become way more important. So you can't bypass those things. So it's a function of the energy in the team and also some of the processes. The reason we were able to bypass some of that roadblocks in terms of like speeding us up was we said that, hey, it's a prototype, and we don't care about if this prototype remains there or not, because if the experiment is successful at this event, we are going to like rebuild it anyways. So let's not worry about the security and the some of the other aspects that you would usually go through, and we short-circuited a bunch of those processes, but still it was a big deal in terms of like how quickly you ship things. Any other questions? Sorry, I've been going on. Cool. So the next one, as I said, I learned it the hard way at my startup how to talk to users, and in my current job, this is the most important thing I do right now, is talking to users. And you learn how to talk to users so in my case, back in the startup days, when we realized we have to talk to users, we started speaking with some user experience researchers who were experts in their field. There is a really good YouTube course about how to talk to users by Y Combinator. So they have a course, 15 series course called like How to Build a Startup. And in one of those lectures, one of the 15 lectures, they talk about how to talk to users. So I would really recommend you to check it out. But the idea is, this is one of the most important things that you do. For me, like I attend events all the time, like big events, small events, because I'm the product manager on events. And from like different perspectives. So from the perspective of an attendee, from the perspective of a speaker, from the perspective of organizers. And although right now I have a team that is actually like better than me in talking to users and like figuring out the gist of like what the users want, their motivations and their desires. But still, as I mentioned, you are the customer advocate, being the product manager. So this is the most important thing you do, and this was one of my key learnings back from the startup. Moving on, there are some other things as well that I learned that are still transferable between. Yeah.
Who are your users? Like in the LinkedIn, like whom do you talk to?
Like, you are my user.
Like recruiters or the general users?
General users, anyone. Like, if you have anything to do with LinkedIn, you are my user.
So the events you go to are the internal or external events?
Our goal is to target all the events. So yes. Eventually, we want to, like, you start with a small segment, but you keep an eye on the overall pie as well, as to like how big you want to go. So if you talk to a user, you try to understand like what category this user is in. So I mentioned like a few segments. Then you also want to understand like at what stage of their career those users are, things like that. Like which location they are in. So if they are from different locations, their motivations might be different. The same for my startup. So for example, we had like one was very big segment for us was women who were housewives. Because they were not super competitive, but Battle Steps, it was sort of a fun game. So they really liked the small competition, which was not very overwhelming. And 85% of our user segment was that. So, you have to identify where your product sticks the most, but you have to keep an eye on all the user segments. Because especially for big companies, the eventual goal is to like cater to everyone. In a startup, you can go really, really micro, but as you grow bigger, hope I answered your question. Cool. Yeah, and some of the other things that I learned from my startup is how to make sense of the data. So dashboards, A/B test. These used to be my like daily morning ritual that I would wake up in the morning, go to Amplitude, see how the metrics are trending, both in startup as well as in my current job. The tools have become different, but the methodology, the kind of things you're looking for still remains the same. You should be able to do some basic queries I was able to do because because of my engineering background. It still helps me right now. So it just makes you faster. For example, some of the metrics, if you're doing any kind of analysis, there will be instances where you won't be able to get the data from these dashboards, in which case you need to go actually look for the data yourself and like figure it out. As PM, it's much faster if you can do it yourself rather than asking like other persons who are specialized from analytics to do that. One thing I didn't learn at my startup, that's why this is grayed out, is the experimentation design, is to how to design the experiments so that you can prove or disprove your hypothesis. And that is what I learned at LinkedIn. And I realized that I should have done it back in my startup, although on a small level. But that experimentation design process is so helpful right now. And the one thing it does for a product manager, it makes you think from a hypothesis perspective. And if you prove or disprove your hypothesis, you still have some valuable output out of it. Unlike in a startup where if you have like good engineering team, you can like ship so fast. It's actually the urge is to just like build it and see what sticks. So it's like throw it on the wall and see what sticks. That's not there at LinkedIn. So you actually have a much more rigorous process. Some more learnings that I learned from my startup and use at LinkedIn. Learn to sell. As I mentioned in the beginning, you sell all the time, both in the startup as well as a product manager. So you sell in the startup, you sell to investors, you sell to press, you sell to potential hires, you sell to your team members. As a PM, you sell to your team because you have to get buy-in from everyone. So you sell to your team, you sell to the partner teams, because usually if it's a complex organization, you will be touching other product areas. So you need to get their buy-in as well. You sell to execs. Eventually they'll sponsor the product or the feature or the project. So you learn to sell. It's a continuous learning that I still think I'm still learning a lot of how to sell. One of the key components how you learn to sell is how to tell stories. So definitely as aspiring PM, you should try to see how you can craft and tell better stories. Focus on impact is another thing. And impact has two aspects. One is quantitative, the second is qualitative. In both the cases, when you are working in a startup or you are working as a product manager, the goal is the eventual impact. So as a startup, you want to reach out to millions of users and you want to change their lives. Same thing applies as a product manager, even at a like bigger organization or a smaller organization. And that's how you are evaluated. Any feature you build as a PM, you eventually want to create the kind of impact. So that focus on impact it helps you keep you from feature bloating, which is a very common thing that happens, especially in startups. One thing that I again didn't learn as much in my startup, which I'm learning a lot in my current role, is the leadership and collaboration piece. And the reason being, we didn't have to collaborate a lot. We were a small team of 8 people, and we will talk in the room. Everyone knows what's coming. You don't have to like write a lot of like written communication or even verbal communication. There is not a lot to show in terms of like the traditional leadership, because being the co-founder and CTO, you are kind of the one who are like deciding where this direction is going, where the strategy is going, what features you want to build. So this is one thing that I'm learning in LinkedIn in a way better manner than I did at startup. But this is something that you will use as a PM. So the only reason I included it here is, although I didn't learn it, it's not transferred from the startup learnings, but This is something you need to have. This is a must-have if you want to succeed as a PM. Okay, one more slide. This is the last slide that I wanted to talk about what I wish I had done more at the start in terms of learning. So one thing which was immediately clear to me when I moved on to LinkedIn is the kind of discipline that they have, that the company has in terms of building any new products, any new features. Because of the process to get buy-ins, you actually have to make a business case. And it can be qualitative or quantitative, but you have to make that business case, and that introduces a certain rigor, both in terms of analytics as well as in user research, that I really missed at my startup. So we had a really high performing team. As I said, like we took pride in our like shipping cadence, weekly shipping cadence. So if you had any idea and we were just like, hey, let's go build it, and we would just go and like build it without thinking whether it really makes sense or whether it will like lead to feature bloating. So this is one of the things that I wish I had done a little bit of more at the startup, so that we could have avoided some of the pains that we encountered later on. So with that, I guess I'm at the end of my presentation. Some advice for you as you like move, like start exploring the product management path, as how to make the transition easier is to build stuff. I'm a builder at heart, so that's my number one advice. Even if you can't build the technical aspects, let's say you can't code, you can still prototype. You can go to Balsamiq, you can like buy a $100 license of Sketch, and you can start building really beautiful prototypes. And that's how you develop your product sense. It's really useful. If you can code, that's brilliant. If you can't, you can try having a co-founder who codes, and then you start learning the ins and outs of buildings. That will help you in many ways. So one, I talked about product sense. It helps you develop that product sense. The other is like once you like make the transition as a product manager, you can relate very well with the engineering team, and they will respect you way more because you bring that to the table. The other advice is read, watch, follow. There are tons of good stuff and bad stuff about product management out there on the internet. So you need to be careful what you're like reading, watching, following, but definitely do that. Some of the good ones that I follow myself: Ken Norton, First Round Capital has a blog, and they send a newsletter every Monday. Brilliant stuff. Product management, one of the key things is strategy. So Strategy by Ben Thompson is again a really good blog. Then I mentioned that YouTube series by Y Combinator. Actually, on Stanford, so there is one by Y Combinator, one by Greylock. You should just watch those 15 to 30 videos, and you'll be much better equipped as a product manager as to like how to scale products, how to talk to users, all kinds of things. They are there, but just go for the quality. And you can keep discovering product. School blogs are again a really good place. They have like some of the best videos I have seen on interviewing. One by Uber PM, I'm forgetting the name, but that was again a really good one. The third advice I have for aspiring product managers is look for products, and by that I mean is you have a phone, just go to App Store, Play Store, and try like browsing through different products. Usually iPhone has slightly higher quality of products, in my opinion. That's only my opinion. But just keep looking for different products, the products that you admire, and like try to figure out what is it that makes that products so successful or so special in your case. And this may not be a like mass product, so it doesn't have to be Instagram or Snapchat. It can be any product that you love personally that solves for your use case. But just try to break it down in terms of what use case it's solving, how is the UI designed to solve that use case, and it could even very well be a website. So I was back when I was trying to learn some of this, I went to mint.com website, and it's one of the most efficient websites I have seen. Like you kind of, before you know what you're doing, you are done with that stuff. So the way they ask for information, the onboarding is so smooth. So that's what, like, keep looking out for products that catch your attention and that are really, really smooth, so that you develop that product sense. And prep for interviews, the final one, because that's again key to like clear those interviews. Happy to talk more about like how to prep for interviews, but two key pieces here. One is a book, Cracking the PM Interview. That's the hands down the best book. I'm sure I see many smiling faces. So that's hands down the best book on how to prep for interviews. And second is mock interviews. So grab your friends, who are PMs better. If not, just grab any friend and ask them to do a mock interview for you. That's going to be really, really helpful. With that, this is the end of my presentation. You can follow me on Twitter. This is how you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And happy to answer any questions.